up today, the United States flies a B-52 bomber over South Korea in a show of force after North Korea's recent nuclear bomb test. The co-founder of South Korea's main opposition party officially launches his new Liberal Party ahead of the April general election. According to polls, Ahn Cheol-soo's People's Party is already spiking voters' interest. Plus, a new session begins at Korea's National Assembly. Lawmakers' main aim will be to pass a slew of contentious bills before it's too late. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Monday, January 11th here in Seoul. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this morning. The United States has responded to North Korea's nuclear bomb test by sending a B-52 bomber on a low-level flight across South Korea. It's a strong show of force against Pyongyang, but also a clear indication of Washington's ironclad commitment to the defense of its allies. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin starts us off.
Military officials from the U.S. and South Korea said in a statement the deployment was arranged as part of the nuclear umbrella the U.S. provides to its Northeast Asian ally. It was also meant as a warning to North Korea that South Korea and the U.S. are ready to retaliate if the North conducts any additional provocations.
B-52 missions reinforce the U.S. commitment to the security of our allies and partners and demonstrate one of the many alliance capabilities available for the defense of the Republic of Korea.
The B-52 left its home base in Guam on Sunday morning and arrived at Osan Air Base in Gyeonggi-do Province 4 hours later at noon. It was accompanied by 2 South Korean F-15Ks and 2 U.S. F-16s. The B-52, which is equipped with nuclear missiles and bunker buster bombs that are capable of targeting underground facilities, is also capable of hitting targets that are 3,000 kilometers away. The bomber flew over Osan before returning back to home base. According to the South Korea-U.S. statement, the two allies plan to take further military counteractions down the road in the wake of the North Korean nuclear test. Seoul-based Yonhap News reports that could include the additional deployment of the nuclear-powered USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier, which is currently based in Japan, and F-22 Raptor stealth fighter jets. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, officials from South Korea, the United States and Japan are scheduled to meet this week to discuss enhanced cooperation against North Korea's recent provocations. Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency reports the vice-ministerial level talks will be held in Tokyo on Saturday, January 16th. The three parties are expected to discuss a wide range of issues, including additional sanctions on the North, as well as ways to persuade China to take a more constructive role in pressuring Pyongyang to give up its nuclear weapons. In addition to that, the three countries' representatives to the six-party talks are reportedly also planning to sit down for a meeting this week. The denuclearization talks involving the two Koreas, the US, China, Japan and Russia, have been stalled since 2008. The United States and Russia, two big powers involved in the North Korea nuclear negotiations, have different ideas over how best to respond to Pyongyang's latest nuclear test. The White House says North Korea will remain an outcast unless it lives up to its commitments and gets rid of its nuclear weapons as it agreed to in a 2005 agreement. It then said the deployment of the B-52 bomber to the Korean Peninsula underscored the deep and enduring alliance the US has with South Korea. Russia, however, is urging members of the six-party nuclear talks to show restraint and to refrain from acting independently. An official at Moscow's Upper House Committee for Defense and Security criticized the B-52 flyover, saying the US has raised tension on the Korean Peninsula by reacting in an unconstructive manner. A recently aired North Korean documentary has raised speculation that relations between Beijing and Pyongyang have frozen up again after the North's claims of a hydrogen bomb test. Over the weekend, North Korea's state-run Central News TV broadcast a documentary on the military parade that took place in October last year to mark the 70th anniversary of its ruling Workers' Party. And what was noticeable was that a high-ranking Chinese official was nowhere to be seen in the film. Ryu Win-san, a member of the Standing Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, was standing alongside North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during the parade, showing the close ties between the allies at that time. However, none of the scene you're watching now was actually shown in the documentary, leading experts to believe North Korea intentionally deleted the footage. Back here in South Korea, and former opposition party co-founder Ahn Cheol-soo presided over the launch of his new Liberal Party on Sunday. The People's Party is already rustling the feathers of the existing main opposition party that Ann Upton left a matter of weeks ago. Shin Se-min has the details.
The curtain has gone up on the new party launched by Ahn Cheol-soo, a former software mogul turned lawmaker who sent a shock through Korean politics last month when he walked away from the party he co-founded. Speaking to roughly 2,000 of his supporters and promoters at the party's launch on Sunday at the Sejong Center in Seoul, Ahn promised to create a new politics by the people and for the people, and vowed a change of government in the years to come.
I will resist and stand strong against any force trying to counter political reform.
The People's Party is expected to take shape quickly ahead of the April's general election. The party's preparatory committee, also launched Sunday, will be co-chaired by Yoon Yeojun, a former environment minister, and Han Sang-jin, a professor at Seoul National University. The new party will hold conventions in 5 cities and provinces around the country, starting with Seoul on January 21st, followed by an inauguration ceremony in early February. The enthusiasm surrounding the new party is already building. A recent poll shows the approval rating for Ahn's new party, even before its launch, was 42%, far outpacing the main opposition Minju Party of Korea, which only had 29% support. With the People's Party off to a running start, the question now is whether it'll gain enough support and recruit members ahead of the April's general election. Pundits say that the success of Ahn's new party depends on the ability to recruit more lawmakers. But Ahn has already stumbled a bit in his recruitment efforts after he had to cancel a plan to bring in 3 high-level officials when it was discovered they were linked to corruption cases. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, staying with domestic politics, and lawmakers will start another extraordinary session at the National Assembly, starting on this Monday, with the goal of putting several contentious bills to bed once and for all. Now, time is of the essence, with a parliamentary election coming up in April. So the most urgent task is redistricting constituencies. The National Assembly is already facing one of the consequences of its failure. A group of candidates is suing Parliament for not meeting its December 31st deadline for redrawing the country's electoral map. That deadline was imposed by a constitutional court ruling that said population changes had rendered the old version invalid. Now, aside from that, lawmakers also have a list of contentious bills to consider, including ones that deal with the service sector, counter-terrorism policy and labour reform. Now, the first trading session of the year is usually characterized by optimism, but that certainly wasn't the case this time, with more than $4 trillion wiped off the global market cap in the first week of trading alone, and that is the worst performance in 4.5 years. Our Kim Min-ji has more on the market turmoil around the world.
It wasn't a good start to the year for the global stock market, with China's system-wide circuit breaker pulling the plug on trading twice in just a week, coupled with growing geopolitical tensions in the form of North Korea's latest provocation and unrest in the Middle East. Shockwaves were felt across the globe. According to Bloomberg, the global market cap stood at over $64.4 trillion on the 3rd of January. But in just 5 days of trading, the figure fell almost 7%, slashing the figure down by over $4 trillion. China posted the biggest losses, shedding nearly 14%, with about $990 billion disappearing. The U.S., which makes up 40% of the global market cap, lost 5.5%. Losses were also pronounced in Europe, with Germany tumbling more than 7% and the UK 6.5%. Back in Asia, Korea shed almost 5% and Japan 4%. This is the market's worst performance since the first week of August in 2011, when global shares fell nearly 8%. The trigger then was the U.S. after Standard & Poor's downgraded Washington's credit rating from AAA to AA+. Looking ahead, with lingering global uncertainties piling up, analysts expect another week of market turmoil to rattle investors. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Paris has been paying tribute to all the people killed there in terror attacks over the past year. A special ceremony on Sunday remembered the 147 victims. The service was held in a central square that has become the symbol of Parisian solidarity since the attacks, which began on January 7, 2015. Tributes were led by French President François Hollande, and a plaque was unveiled in memory of those killed. France remains under a state of emergency following the terror attacks in November last year, in which gunmen linked to the Islamic State militant group murdered 130 people in the French capital. Now, staying in Europe, and Germans in Cologne came out to protest their country's migrant policy after a wave of attacks against women in their city on New Year's Eve. Riot police broke up the demonstrations, but the growing tension there is not expected to let up anytime soon. For more details, Lee Ji-won reports.
Angry Germans in Cologne protested their country's asylum policy on Saturday after the sexual assaults on women on New Year's Eve. According to the BBC, about 1,700 people, some of whom support Pegida, a far-right group that opposes the immigration of Muslims from the Middle East, participated in the protests. Much of the criticism was aimed at German leader Angela Merkel for her policy of welcoming over 1 million migrants and refugees to the country last year. Protesters chanted "Merkel must go" and waved the German flag. As the demonstrators grew more violent, throwing beer bottles, firecrackers and stones at officers, the Cologne police responded with tear gas and water cannons to disperse them. Several officers and a journalist were injured in the process. The protests come on the back of the New Year's Eve assault, in which about 120 women have reported having been sexually assaulted and mugged by groups of men on New Year's Eve. Many of the 31 suspects charged are from North Africa or Middle Eastern countries, and 18 were asylum seekers. As the anti-migrant protests continued, counter-demonstrators held a protest against Pegida, with about 1,300 people in attendance and some shouting "Nazis out." The German chancellor has since proposed policies to make it easier to deport asylum seekers who have committed crimes. But with the growing public unrest, the tension in Germany is not likely to let up anytime soon. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, lottery fever has reached a frantic level in the United States after another Powerball drawing session went by without another winner. According to lottery officials in the U.S., with no winner, the jackpot is expected to soar from nearly $950 million to $1.3 billion by the time the next drawing is held on Wednesday. And that is quite the growth spurt from the starting sum of $40 million back in November. Now, if you fancy your chances, the odds to win are 1 in more than 292 million. With the largest jackpot in U.S. history at stake, some stores had to rush to resupply the paper for the tickets when they ran out. Powerball is played in 44 states, as well as the District of Columbia, the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Good luck to anyone playing that on Wednesday. Now, in health news, cancer cells get their energy to multiply through fermentation. In an attempt to prevent them doing that, a team of Korean researchers are developing new cancer treatment methods that restrain the fermentation process. Our Park Se-young has the story.
Beer is made of wheat or barley, and yeast converts the glucose in the wort to alcohol. This fermentation process is carried out in the absence of oxygen. Cancer cells use the same process to produce energy. Without using oxygen, cancer cells convert sugar into lactic acid. Healthy human cells produce energy using oxygen through respiration. Oxygen-based metabolism produces more energy, but the cost to produce molecules for respiration are twice those needed to ferment glucose. Also, the byproducts from the fermentation process can be used to form cancer cells during research, making the method even more cost-effective. This study could even have implications in identifying potential targets in treating cancer.
If we block the metabolism of cancer cells in collaboration with existing anti-cancer drugs, it will boost their effectiveness.
Fermentation does not only occur in foods and drinks such as kimchi and beer, it may even provide a new strategy to treat cancer. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Monday morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in to our newscasts, and we hope your work week gets off to a wonderful start. Until next time, goodbye.